John McAllister had lived alone for more than 10 years on his ranch, miles away from the nearest town. The ranch lay in the heart of the Wild West, where the land stretched endlessly under the vast blue sky, and storms could arrive without warning. John had chosen this life long ago, after losing his family in a small accident, believing that solitude was safer than trusting anyone again. Over the years, he had grown used to the quiet, the sounds of the wind, the rustle of grass, and the occasional cry of a hawk circling overhead. His days followed a strict rhythm, feeding the cattle, checking fences, repairing broken barns, and hunting when food ran low. Each task had become a part of him, as natural as breathing. Despite his outward toughness, John sometimes felt the weight of loneliness. Nights were the hardest. The house creaked in the wind, and the silence was so complete that he could hear his own thoughts echoing off the walls. He would sit by the fire, staring into the flames, remembering times when laughter and voices had filled his life. Those memories were bittersweet, bringing a warmth he hadn't felt in years, but also a reminder of what he had lost. John's neighbors in the nearby town knew him as a reliable man who could handle any trouble on his own. They respected him but also thought him strange. Most people preferred companionship, trading stories and helping each other, but John kept his distance. He didn't trust easily. Over time, he had learned that the West could be unforgiving, and being alone was often the safest way to survive. One morning, John saddled his horse early, as the sun barely touched the horizon. Mist rose from the fields and the air smelled of damp earth and grass. He had noticed unusual tracks near the edge of his property for a few days, and curiosity gnawed at him. The prints were different from any cattle hoof marks or ordinary travelers' footprints. They were light but purposeful, like someone who knew the land well. John followed the trail, moving cautiously. The tracks led him through narrow canyons and rocky paths he had traversed countless times alone. But today they felt different, almost alive, as if the land itself was guiding him toward something unknown. He paused at a ridge and saw movement in the distance. A shadow crossed the sun, swift and quiet. He squinted, trying to see clearly. It was a girl, young and strong, moving with a grace that surprised him. She was riding a horse like she had grown up with it, controlling it with ease. Her hair blew in the wind and her eyes were sharp, full of life and curiosity. John felt a strange mix of caution and fascination. He had not seen anyone like her in years. Most travelers stuck to the main roads, afraid of the wild lands. But she was different, untamed and fearless, like the wind itself. Over the next few days, John kept noticing signs of her presence. Sometimes he would find fresh horse tracks in the early morning. Other times, small things would be moved around his property. Gates left open, tools shifted, but nothing stolen. Whoever she was, she seemed to be testing him, learning his routines, maybe even helping in her own quiet way. John couldn't decide whether to be annoyed or curious. One evening, after a long day repairing a fence that had been torn down by the wind, John sat on the porch, sipping coffee as the sun dipped behind the distant hills. He saw a movement at the edge of the field near the creek. He froze, heart quickening. The girl appeared, standing tall with her horse nearby. She watched him carefully, and for a moment neither spoke. The wind carried the distant sound of cattle lowing and the soft rustle of leaves. John felt a thrill he hadn't felt in years, a mixture of fear and excitement. Days turned into weeks, and John began to notice more of her. She didn't approach him directly, but seemed to leave small signs. Firewood neatly stacked, a bucket of water left for the animals, a stray calf guided back to the pen. John was careful not to show that he noticed, but inside he felt a strange warmth. Someone cared enough about his life to make it easier, even in the quietest way. John also began thinking about the stories of the land. The West was full of legends of brave people who lived off the land and knew its secrets. He wondered if she was one of them. Whoever she was, she moved with a freedom he had long forgotten. She wasn't afraid of storms or wild animals. She seemed to belong to the land itself, as if it had taught her everything she needed to know. Despite himself, John began to anticipate her presence. He would check the fields for signs of activity, feeling a quiet thrill whenever he spotted a fresh track or a note left near the barn. He didn't know her name, where she came from, or what she wanted, but he felt a connection growing. It was strange and uncomfortable at first, because he was used to solitude, but it also reminded him of something he had long denied. The world was bigger than his fences and his routines. One morning, John decided to follow the trail more carefully. The girl had been near the northern edge of his property, where the land dropped into a deep canyon. He rode slowly, keeping to the shadows, observing her movements. She noticed him, of course, but did not flee. Instead, she watched him with curiosity. Her eyes were steady and fearless. John realized then that she was testing him, not out of mischief, but out of interest. She wanted to see if he was as capable as he seemed, if he could handle the wild and its challenges. A sudden storm rolled in that afternoon. The sky darkened and wind whipped through the canyon. John worked quickly to secure his animals and equipment, but the storm was stronger than he expected. He heard a cry over the roar of the wind and saw the girl struggling to control her horse. Without thinking, John rode to help. Together, they guided the horse to shelter, working side by side through the rain and wind. It was the first time they truly met, standing drenched and exhausted in the middle of the storm. They didn't speak much, just nodded and moved as needed. But John noticed something remarkable: her courage, her skill, and her connection to the land. She was not just wild. She was capable, resourceful, and unafraid. And for the first time in years, John felt something he had thought impossible: hope. After the storm passed, she vanished as quickly as she had appeared, leaving only a faint trail in the mud. John returned to his cabin, heart racing, thinking about the girl who had entered his life so suddenly. For days afterward, he could not stop thinking about her strength, her independence, and the strange warmth she had left behind. The rancher who had lived alone for years began to realize that his world might be changing. The quiet, the solitude, the endless routines, all of it was shifting. Someone new had entered his life, someone who challenged his solitude and brought a spark he had long forgotten. John didn't know what lay ahead, but for the first time in a long time, he felt anticipation instead of emptiness. He continued his daily work, but now he looked for her. Every shadow, every sound, every movement of the wind could be a sign, and he found himself hoping that one day she would appear again, not as a stranger or a test, but as someone who might change his life forever. John McAllister, the lone rancher, had faced storms, wild animals, and the harshness of the West, but nothing had prepared him for the quiet, unstoppable force of a wild spirit who had stepped into his life and reminded him that even in the most isolated place, connection, curiosity, and hope could still exist. And as the sun set behind the hills, painting the sky in gold and orange, John knew that his life was about to take a turn he had never imagined, but one that might just bring warmth and companionship back to his long, lonely heart. Days passed after the storm, and John could not stop thinking about the girl who had appeared so suddenly on his land. He did not know her name, where she came from, or why she had chosen to help him, but he felt a strange connection to her. The quiet of his ranch seemed less lonely now, filled with anticipation and curiosity. Every morning he checked the fences and fields with a careful eye, hoping to catch a glimpse of her or see signs that she had been near. One afternoon he spotted fresh footprints near the creek again. They were the same delicate, purposeful marks he had noticed before. His heart beat faster as he followed the trail slowly, carefully observing the surrounding land. The girl appeared just as he reached a small clearing. She was tending to a stray calf that had wandered too far from the herd. When she noticed him, she froze for a moment, her dark eyes studying him with intensity. She did not run, but neither did she smile. Instead, she returned to the calf, showing a quiet confidence that both impressed and intrigued him. "Who are you?" John asked softly, not wanting to startle her. The girl looked at him carefully before answering. "I am a huli," she said simply. Her voice was calm, steady, and carried the weight of someone who had grown up in the wild. She did not give more information, but the sound of her name felt right, natural, as if it belonged to the land itself. John nodded, unsure of what to say next. He had lived alone for so long that speaking to another person felt strange, even awkward. But he could see that a huli was not a threat. She was independent, brave, and had shown that she could handle herself. Over time, he realized that she had also come to respect him, noticing the way he cared for his animals and his land. The following days marked the beginning of a delicate friendship. A huli would appear occasionally, always at a distance at first, helping quietly with chores when John was not looking. She guided lost cattle back to the pen, carried water to the animals, or left fresh firewood stacked neatly near the cabin. John pretended not to notice at first, but inside he felt a growing warmth. He began to appreciate her presence even though he did not fully understand it. One evening, as the sun set in the western sky, painting the land in shades of gold and orange, Ahuli approached him directly. She carried a small basket filled with fresh herbs she had gathered from the nearby hills. "I thought these might help your cooking," she said quietly. Her smile was brief but genuine, and John felt a strange happiness he had not experienced in years. "Thank you," he replied, surprised at how easily the words came. They spoke for a few minutes about the land, the weather, and the challenges of ranch life. It was the first time John felt a true conversation with someone since he had moved to the ranch years ago. Ahuli listened carefully and shared her thoughts, and for the first time John realized that he could enjoy another person's company without fear. Their friendship deepened slowly. John learned that Ahuli was skilled with horses, knowledgeable about the land, and capable of surviving in the wild with nothing but her instincts and intelligence. She taught him some techniques he had never considered, like tracking the animals differently, understanding the signs of the weather, and even recognizing plants that could be used for medicine. He began to admire her in ways he had never expected. She was wild, yes, but also wise and compassionate, and her presence brought a new energy to his life. One day, trouble arrived unexpectedly. A small group of cattle rustlers attempted to take advantage of the ranch's isolation. John was ready as always, but the situation was more dangerous than usual. The rustlers were fast and bold, and John realized he could not handle them alone. Just as he prepared to defend the ranch, Ahuli appeared from the hills riding her horse swiftly. She moved with incredible skill, helping to herd the animals to safety and creating confusion among the rustlers. Her bravery and quick thinking saved the day, and John could not help but feel grateful, impressed, and deeply connected to her. Afterward, as they tended to the cattle and repaired fences, John spoke quietly, almost to himself. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Ahuli looked at him, her eyes steady and serious. "We take care of what we care about," she said simply. The words struck him deeply. He realized that she had not come into his life by chance. She had chosen to be there to help him, and in doing so she had begun to teach him how to trust and care again. Days turned into weeks, and their bond grew stronger. They shared quiet moments around the fire in the evenings, talking about the land, their experiences, and their dreams. John discovered that he could laugh again, and Ahuli learned to enjoy the simple comforts of his ranch life. Together they faced storms, wild animals, and the challenges of ranch life, each learning from the other. John learned to move more lightly through the land, and Ahuli learned the value of routines and planning. Despite the harshness of the West, life began to feel warmer and brighter. The ranch, once a place of solitude and struggle, became a home filled with companionship, trust, and quiet joy. John began to imagine a future he had never dared to consider, a life shared with someone who understood him, challenged him, and brought a new kind of strength to his world. The people in the nearby town began to notice the change in John as well. He smiled more, spoke more freely, and no longer seemed burdened by the weight of solitude. Some were curious about the young Apache girl they occasionally saw near his ranch, but John did not worry about their opinions. What mattered most was the connection he had found, the bond that had grown from small acts of help and quiet understanding. One crisp morning, as the first light of dawn touched the hills, John and Ahuli rode together across the plains, guiding cattle to greener pastures. The wind carried their laughter, and for the first time John felt truly free. He realized that his world had expanded beyond the boundaries of his ranch. He had learned that solitude was not the only way to survive, and that trust and friendship could bring strength, hope, and even love. Ahuli had changed him in ways he could not have imagined. She had shown him courage, kindness, and the power of a free spirit. She had brought life back to his quiet days, and he had come to care for her deeply, not just for her skill or bravery, but for the person she was. John McAllister, the rancher who had lived alone for so many years, now understood that life was richer when shared with someone who respected the land, valued hard work, and cared for others as deeply as he did. Evenings became their favorite time of day. They would sit by the fire talking, laughing, or simply enjoying the silence together. The ranch no longer felt empty or lonely. John no longer felt the constant ache of isolation. Instead, he felt warmth, trust, and hope for the future. The wild spirit of the Apache girl had taken the reins, not by force, but by showing him that connection, courage, and love could flourish even in the most remote and rugged lands. John knew the West would always be challenging, with storms, harsh winters, and dangers hidden in the hills. But with a hoolie by his side, he felt ready for whatever came next. Together they faced the land and its trials with strength, respect, and a bond that had grown slowly but deeply. The once lonely rancher had found a partner who complemented him perfectly. Wild yet wise, strong yet caring, free yet loyal. As the sun set over the horizon, painting the sky in colors that mirrored the fire in their hearts, John realized that his life had been transformed. The ranch that had once symbolized solitude and struggle now symbolized hope, companionship, and love. And in that quiet moment, he silently thanked the wild, brave girl who had entered his life, guided him, and taught him that even in the most rugged places, the heart could find warmth and joy. John and Ahuli continued their life together on the ranch, sharing work, laughter, and the quiet beauty of the West. Their days were filled with challenges, but also with trust, care, and the knowledge that together they could overcome anything. The ranch was no longer just a place of survival. It was a home, a sanctuary, and a reminder that even the wildest spirits could find connection and love in the unlikeliest places.